Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Keck. I am currently pastor of Connection Christian Center in Oak Harbor, Washington, which is a Church of God church out of Cleveland, Tennessee. That specific church is what is called a ministry to the military, which prioritizes and pursues the military as a ministry. We believe that it is a very under pursued portion of the church, and so that is our main demographic, is to search and pursue ministry to the military. Most of our demographics are overseas because it's hard sometimes, especially if you don't get a chaplain that lines up with your faith. So that's the majority, but we opened up one in the States. And I am also an active duty sailor. As you can see, I am currently on deployment in Bahrain. So that's where I am coming to you with this video, but that is not the main topic of this story. So I will just go ahead and begin from here. I was raised a Christian, and like most Christians who were raised as a Christian in the 90s, we had a certain basically lifestyle, a certain basic genre. Like there was something that fit for every category. Like we had the famous Christian artists like Carmen or DC Talk or Newsboys, Michael W. Smith, for those of you who, if I'm probably hitting some nails on the head with these, Bible Man. We had Amy Grant, Stephen Curtis Chapman, WWJD bracelets. You had the Left Behind series. Christian movies with B-list actors, right? And the nostalgia list just goes on and on and on. And interwoven with some of these genre and cliche type things was a scientific theory that most of us even know today that was almost completely based on theology, known as young earth creationism. And it was taught almost universally. And that is the belief that the earth is roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years old, that the earth was created in a literal 6 24-hour day periods. Other things that they believe is Noah's flood covered the entire earth, and that all of this is to be interpreted extremely literally. And as logical humans, as we move on with society, we moved into the 21st century, and what did we do? We threw out the distasteful and awful music. We threw out the corny Christian cliches because it left us still wanting. But the problem is did we fail to also throw out this Christian's interpretation of Scripture without scientific support? So the question I want to pose right now is, does the baby indeed need to be thrown out with the bathwater? Well, this kind of reminds me of something that happened, a few centuries earlier in the church. History is always doomed to repeat itself if we don't pay attention. A man named Copernicus noticed that the earth may not indeed be the center of the universe, which they thought it was. He developed his own heliocentric theory, and that was placing the sun at the center of the universe. Well, this was at odds, completely at odds with the scriptural interpretation by even people known as John Calvin and Martin Luther that made the earth both flat and the center of the universe. And they use scriptures such as Joshua 10:12 and Ecclesiastes 4-6. And if you remember in Joshua 10:12, that's when the earth, basically the sun stood still. So they used that to combat Copernicus. And now Galileo came after him, and he used his telescope that he made to observe the seeable universe at that time. And he started discovering vast amounts of scientific evidence that supported both Copernicus and this heliocentric theory that he came up with, which puts the sun at the center of the universe. So the church had a decision to make. Do they either double down on their interpretation of Scripture or notice that science is revealing nature, and a new approach towards those scriptures just needs to be adjusted? So R.C. Sproul, a modern theologian, comments on this, and he says, and he admits we can err as humans, and we need to realize that both science and theology deserve unbiased interpretations. Well, since New Earth creationism is starting to sound like a bit like flat Earth theories in the scientific community, shouldn't it be time we reevaluate the evidence? Well, this means we have to go back to the proverbial drawing board every once in a while and see if our approach is off the mark. So this also brings up a good point of contention in the church and the scientific community today is at what level do we give science the authority over or even equal to Scripture? Is it equal? Is it over? Is it less than? Well, there's a few science faith-based models that help illuminate these relational categories that everybody pretty much falls into somewhere. One is that they conflict. It's the view that all science and religion is at odds. It cannot be combined. Religion is just not to be trusted in the scientific community. Another one is separate magisteria, and this one's promoted by Stephen Jay Gould, and it states that science and religion basically just represent facts and values that are both legitimate, but they just don't overlap. There's no real agreement between them. So we see those two bubbles starting to move in a little closer. One more is complementary, and that is science and religion have some areas of agreement, but they're mainly separate, segregated areas of study. There's no real reason to put them together. And we move into another category is called fusion or even hard concordism. And this is the attempt to see scientific discoveries as always belonging in Scripture. Sometimes it's even to the point of even forcing science to fit into Scripture. And the last one I'm going to talk about is constructive integration. And this view sees science and religion giving evidence to support and conform and can inform and reform both doctrines and theories. At this point, once you kind of figure out what you're looking at and the different views as far as where Scripture and even religion fit into science, you have to choose one. And as a responsible Christian, I have to choose one as well. But before I give my tent a place to camp in, I'd like to bring in the premise of dual revelation. Now, this thought process recognizes that both God has revealed himself through his written word, and as a Christian, we recognize that as the Holy Bible, and he's also revealed himself through his creation. This secondary revelation integrates science into theology in a really most unique way. It allows for modern scientific processes to show God's handiwork in creation. Now, Dr. Hugh Ross, the instigator, the impetus of reasons to believe, which I'll explain more later as its own theory of cosmogony, says that dual revelation allows for the delicate balance of keeping both the scholar humble when overreaching, yet striving towards courageous progression if underreaching. So the Christians are called out in Scripture to become both good theologians and good scientists. It's noteworthy to add that Dr. Ross would consider himself finding himself in the camp of what we would call soft concordism. So earlier we talked about hard concordism, but he's more in the soft, and that allows for a nice ebb and flow between Scripture and science to help reveal each other. So one isn't necessarily always in one camp as trumping the other, or one isn't always below the other. It's allowing the evidence logically to be laid out before you, and then finding out what else needs to conform or inform the other. So he is also going to be the person that I will probably lean on to the most for the rest of this video. So as you're paying attention, you'll hear a lot of different references, most likely towards either Dr. Ross or his colleagues that he works with. So we find ourselves at this impasse, and I've given you the information, and now we must tread forward before we continue. And for the sake of time in this video, I will refrain from trying to win anyone over to any side of those viewpoints of science and religion integration. However, I will give you guys this, the Kalam Cosmological Argument by William Lane Craig, I think will suffice for now. Now, the Kalam Cosmological Argument says, and simply, every being which begins has a cause for its beginning. Now, the world is a being which begins. Therefore, it possesses a cause for beginning. Because we needed philosophy here, and this is a philosophical argument for a second, I will come back to the science, but we need philosophy to help us, because if the universe has a cause, and it's caused by an uncaused creator, which is what the Kalam cosmological argument is saying, then it would make sense to at least explore the possibility and the likelihood of a Judeo-Christian God as a creator. Therefore, if he is the creator, science and theology must integrate to some degree. There's no way around it. So far, Dr. Ross has taken the most up-to-date scientific discoveries and bounced them off of Scripture. And in his process, his dual revelation, his soft concordist approach begins to emerge as the most plausible. So he arrives at these conclusions by using the scientific method consistently for both science and Scripture. Now, this method he uses is, I'll go down the list here. He identifies the phenomenon to be investigated and explained. That's number one. Number two, he identifies the frame of reference or points of view to be used in the study and describing the phenomenon. Number three, he determines the initial conditions of the phenomenon. Number four, he performs an experiment to observe the phenomenon, noting then what takes place when, where, and in what order. Number five, he notes the final conditions for the phenomenon. Number six, for a tentative explanation, he forms a tentative explanation or hypothesis for how and why things transpired as they did. Number seven, he tests that hypothesis with further experiments and observations. Number eight, he revises his hypothesis accordingly. Number nine, and this is the final one, he determines how well the explanation of the phenomenon integrates with the explanations of the related phenomenon. It's beautiful because he applies this both, like I said earlier, to both Scripture and science. Now let's explore this a little deeper. It is without a doubt the most likely, we're going to apply it here. Most likely, the origin of the universe is a result of the Big Bang. Most of us know the Big Bang Theory. Now, this theory emerged out of the observable instance of an ever-expanding universe. The problem with this is evident from the beginning. Philosophically, it cannot explain what was before the Big Bang. Scientifically, it has no idea what was before, and according to science, something cannot come from nothing. Even Stephen Hawking himself admits that, and by the way, I'm quoting this, it is difficult to explain the universe beginning in this way, except as an act of God who intended to create beings like us. Let's talk let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the origin of life. Even modern atheist and agnostic scientists find it difficult to support their own theories on the origin of life. First, they recognize their limitations in science itself. Ken Miller, a noted atheist scientist, recognizes that proving God through merely scientific experiments is impossible. Science discovers what is already in place and not necessarily how it got there. However, scientific studies can explain and have explained for the origin of life that life began on Earth as a complex organism. Life began with DNA replication. Life began with protein synthesis. Life began with cell wall biosynthesis. Life began energy harvesting pathways. This complexity denotes a designer in all these different things, just like a watch. And complex life appeared suddenly and in very hostile conditions. Dr. Ross and Reasons to Believe uses this to point for the necessity for God. This also acts as a springboard for Reasons to Believe. Upon repeated tests, the evolutionary paradigm fails in the face of repeated evolution, and biblical creation gains support off of this because there's a clear lack of support. The genetically unique organisms found are ones that would support a creator. Each discovery of uniqueness supports and strengthens the case for creation. Now let's talk about convergence. Convergence is another way that points towards a creator. Convergence shows similarities between living creatures in the form and structure, but do not share an ancestry, such as birds and bats, both having wings and the ability to fly. Creationism would say that this is because of a creator identified the simplest solution for living flying beings, thus adding another plausible outcome for creationism. Reasons to Believe also highlighted the instances of a perfect environment for life to exist on Earth alone. We have not found anything yet, and I'll get to that a little bit. We have not found anything yet in our known universe, in our known galaxy, that even close to coming to what the conditions on Earth need. Now, there are in our book, we had More Than a Theory by Hugh Ross, there are 109 relevant scientific data points that are testable and proved with Reasons to Believe theory on creationism. For example, the Cambrian explosion points towards a creator. The timing of the Neolithic revolution in human culture points to a creator. The Lazarus taxa phenomenon points to a creator. In this same book, he spends more than 200 pages identifying the unique time, space, and placement of Earth and the opportunity for this life to exist, including oxygen levels being exactly what they need to be at the exact right time. The place of Earth in not only our solar system, but related to other planets and the sun, including the rotation. I can't get into all of the details, but it's very in-depth. Highly recommend reading the book. The placement of Earth in our galaxy, and there's just too many examples to include in this video. Like I said, I highly recommend the book. But there are also these examples basically just skim the surface on how our God, our Christian God, is the creator and giving evidence for that. In another direction, coming from the theological side, we can use scripture to identify humans as created distinctly different. In fact, scripture says that humans are created in the image of God, imago Dei, and ex nihilo, meaning out of nothing. Genesis chapter 1:26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image." Genesis 9:6 then repeats this same man in our image. James 3:9 says another thing about man being created in God's image. And then this might be asking, okay, at this point in time, you're saying, well, okay, what does that mean to be created in God's image? Well, for us as humans, that means we're rational, we're volitional, we're relational, we are powerful, we're spiritual, and we're even made righteous from the start. And this is according to scripture. We share none of those traits with any other portions of God's creation, especially animals. For instance, animals do not share our cultural and intellectual traits. They don't share our observance of time. They don't share our conscious and value systems. They don't share our spiritual and religious nature, and they don't share our pursuit of truth. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video now because I want us to realize that we need to re-look and reevaluate what we believe and why we believe it. It's time for us to then head up and be a part of a serious conversation in looking at both science and theology and how they can help each other. We need to remain humble and continually look for the truth that God is continually trying to reveal to us. The young earth creation views leave much in the wake of wanting upon new scientific discovery. While Reasons to Believe foundation is just the beginning to harden like a well-laid concrete. Just like the gimmicks and the cliches of the 90s Christian that tried to conform to society rather than sound doctrine, and all of that was thrown out, we need to take sound scientific approach and evaluate new scientific discoveries as God continues to illuminate these revelations in our research. If what is continually proves true does not agree with our outlook, maybe we need to reevaluate and adjust our view. I want to thank all of you for watching this video. God bless you all. Hopefully this blesses you and introduces a spark that can carry you further into your own studies. God bless you. Bye.